Her hand closed around my arm just past the security checkpoint. Hard, the grip of someone drowning grabbing the nearest solid thing. I'd never seen her before in my life. Dark eyes, a wedding guest dress, a crumpled boarding pass in her other fist. Behind her, the arrivals board flipped over to a flight marked landed. She pulled me close enough that I could smell jasmine and panic. Her eyes locked on something over my shoulder, and she said it fast and low. "I know this is insane. Please, act like my husband for the next 40 minutes. My grandmother is about to come through that gate, and it's the only thing she's ever asked me for." I had spent the entire week being the man nobody wanted to marry, and a total stranger had just grabbed me out of a crowd to be exactly that. Let me back up. My name is Nolan Reyes. I'm 33 years old, and I'm an actuary. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. Nobody at any party I've ever attended has known either. I calculate risk for an insurance company. I spend my days figuring out how likely things are to go wrong, and how much it costs to be ready when they do. It's a good job. It's a safe job. I am, by every measure available, a safe man. That, it turns out, is the problem. 1 week before a stranger grabbed my arm in that airport, my fiancée called off our wedding. Her name was Dana, and we'd been together 3 years, and the invitations were already out, and 8 days before the ceremony, she sat me down and told me she'd met someone else, someone who, in her words, makes me feel alive. She said I was wonderful. She said I was the safest, steadiest, most reliable man she'd ever known. She said it the way you'd describe a reliable car you were trading in for something faster. "You're the smart choice, Nolan," she told me. "You're just not the exciting one. And I don't want to spend my life being sensible." I was flying home that day from her city, where I'd gone to formally cancel a venue, return $200 of deposits, and tell my own parents, who'd flown in for a wedding that wasn't going to happen, that the safe son had been passed over one more time. I was 33 years old, standing in an airport, feeling like a man nobody in the history of the world had ever chosen for anything. One number on a spreadsheet marked low risk, low reward. That's who I was when Priya grabbed my arm. Before I tell you how the worst week of my life turned into the best 40 minutes of it, if you believe the person who feels overlooked and passed over might just be the one somebody's about to choose, do me a quick favor and tap subscribe, because this channel is full of stories exactly like this one, and I'd hate for you to miss the next. All right. Back to the terminal. "My grandmother," the stranger said again, gripping my arm, her voice shaking. "Please, I don't have time to explain. She's landing on a layover, 40 minutes, and she thinks I'm married, and I'm not, and I came here to tell her the truth, and I can't. I looked at that gate, and I can't be the thing that breaks her heart. 40 minutes, that's all. Then she flies on, and you never see me again. Please. Now." A sensible man, a low-risk man, says no, says I'm sorry, this is madness, and walks to his gate. That's the man Dana traded in. And maybe that's exactly why I did the opposite. Maybe I was so tired of being the safe choice that when a total stranger looked at me like I was the only solid thing in the terminal, I decided, for once in my careful life, to be a risk. "What's my name?" I said. She blinked. "What? If I'm your husband, I need to know my name, and how we met, and how long we've been married. Your grandmother's going to ask." I set my bag down. "You've got about 90 seconds to brief me before she comes through that gate. Go." Something broke open in her face. Relief. Disbelief. The first shaky edge of a laugh. "Priya?" she said. "I'm Priya." "We've been married 8 months. We met at, God, a bookstore. You knocked over a display. It's a whole story. I'll fill it in. Your name can be your real name. It's easier." "Nolan," I said. "Nolan Reyes. Priya Anand." She grabbed my left hand and looked at it, panicked. "You don't have a ring." I looked down. 8 days ago I'd have had one. I do, actually, I said, and I reached into my coat pocket, where a plain wedding band I hadn't been able to bring myself to throw away had been sitting like a stone for a week. I slid it on. It fit, because of course it fit. There, married man. Priya stared at the ring, and then at me, and for 1 second the panic dropped and she really looked at me. The way you look at someone you're suddenly aware is a whole person. Why do you have a... Long story, I said. We've got about 20 seconds. Which one's your grandmother? And then the gate opened, and the passengers started coming through, and I watched Priya Anand transform. She straightened. She smiled. A real, radiant, terrified smile. And she took my arm, and she whispered, "Her name is Nani." She half raised me. "Please be kind to her. She's the best person I know." Nani came through in a wheelchair pushed by a flight attendant, a tiny, ancient woman in a deep red shawl with eyes like 2 bright black stones, and behind her came a sharp-faced woman in her 50s who could only have been Priya's mother. And the moment Nani saw Priya, her whole face cracked open like sunrise. "Priya, Priya, Beta." And then her eyes went straight past her granddaughter to me, and she clasped her hands together, and she said, in an accent worn soft by years, "And this is him? This is my Nolan? My Nolan." She said it like she'd been saving the words, like she already loved a man she'd never met. I did the only thing that felt true. I stepped forward, and I crouched down to her level in the wheelchair, and I took her small papery hand in both of mine, and I said, "Nani, it's so good to finally meet you. Priya talks about you more than she talks about anything," which was, technically, true. She'd been talking about Nani for the last 90 seconds without pause. Nani's eyes filled instantly. She reached up and put her hand on my cheek, this stranger's hand, warm and light as paper, and she looked at me the way nobody had looked at me in a very long time, maybe ever, like I was a gift, like I was chosen. And I felt something crack in my chest that Dana had spent 8 days sitting on. "He is handsome," Nani announced to the whole terminal. "And he is kind. I can see it. You cannot fake kindness. I have lived 84 years, I know." She turned to Priya's mother. "Meena, did I not tell you? Did I not say she would find a good one?" The mother, Meena, was not smiling. Meena was looking at me the way I look at a risk assessment. Sharp, suspicious, calculating. And I understood, in that instant, that the grandmother was the heart of this, and the mother was the wall. And if this was going to work for 40 minutes, I was going to have to get past Meena Anand. 8 months married, Meena said. And this is the first we meet him. At an airport, on a layover. Her eyes flicked to Priya. You couldn't have brought him for the wedding season. You couldn't have brought him once. Mom, Priya started. It's my fault, I said. Calm. It's the only setting I have. My work travel is relentless. I'm an actuary. I go where the contracts are, and it's kept me away far more than it should have. I've wanted to meet Nani since the day I met Priya. When we heard you'd have a layover here, I moved a client meeting to be at this gate. I wasn't going to miss her twice. I looked at Meena steadily. I know how it looks, us keeping to ourselves. It wasn't respect I was withholding. It was time I didn't have. I'm sorry for that. Meena held my eyes for a long, long moment. She didn't soften, but she didn't push either. And Nani, oblivious to all of it, was already tugging my sleeve. 40 minutes, Nani said. They give us 40 minutes before we board again. Sit. Sit with your Nani. Tell me everything. So we sat, the 4 of us, on a row of hard airport chairs, and for 40 minutes, I was Priya Anand's husband. And here is the strange thing. It should have been terrifying. It was. For the first 10 minutes, Priya and I building a marriage in real time, under the sharp eyes of her mother, filling in the bookstore, and the toppled display, and the honeymoon we improvised with our knees pressed together in warning. But somewhere in there, it stopped being a performance. Because Nani didn't ask the questions Mina would have. Nani asked, "Does he make you laugh?" And Priya, caught off guard, looked at me. This stranger who'd just decided to be brave for the first time in his careful life. And she said, "Yes, yes, he does." And it wasn't a lie, because in the last 20 minutes I'd made her laugh 3 times out of sheer nerves, and we both knew it. Nani asked me, "Do you take care of my Priya? She thinks she has to do everything alone. Always she has been like this. Do you make sure she lets you carry things?" And I said, "I'm learning how. She's stubborn, but I'm patient. Patience is basically my whole personality." Nani laughed so hard she had to hold her chest, and Mina almost smiled, and Priya looked at me with something I couldn't name, and 40 minutes started to feel like the shortest amount of time in the world. Mina nearly caught us once. She waited until Nani was distracted fishing a photograph out of her bag, and then she leaned across and said, casual as a knife, "Nolan, which hotel did you two stay at for the wedding night?" Priya's told Nani the story a dozen times. I forget the name. It was a test, clean and cold, a detail Priya and I had never invented, a trap with no safe answer. I felt Priya freeze beside me. "Honestly," I said, and I let myself smile, rueful. "I couldn't tell you the name of it if my life depended on it, and Priya still gives me grief about it. I'd booked the wrong place, realized it an hour before, and scrambled to fix it while she pretended not to notice I was panicking. So whatever she told Nani, believe her version. Mine's just a man who nearly ruined his own wedding night with a reservation error." I glanced at Priya. "She's never going to let me forget it." "Never," Priya managed, squeezing my hand hard enough to bruise. Mina studied me a moment longer, and something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the grudging respect of one careful person recognizing another. "At least you admit your mistakes," she said. "Most men her age don't." She sat back. It wasn't approval, but it was a truce, and a truce was all I needed for the time we had left. Then, with maybe 10 minutes left, Nani did the thing that turned the whole day upside down. She reached under her red shawl and worked something off her own wrist. A gold bangle, thin and worn smooth, the kind of thing that has lived on a body for 50 years. And she took Priya's hand, and she slid it onto Priya's wrist, and her eyes were streaming now. "This was my mother's," Nani said. "And then it was mine. The day I married your grandfather. 51 years I wore it. I have carried it across the whole world in my bag, Beta, on every trip, for years, because I wanted to give it to you myself, on the day I finally saw you settled and safe and loved. Not send it in the post, give it, with my own hand." She closed Priya's fingers around it. "Now I have. Now I can rest easy. My Priya is loved." And Priya Anand went absolutely white, because it was one thing to lie about a husband. It was another thing entirely to have a 51-year-old heirloom, the most precious thing her grandmother owned, pressed onto her wrist as a blessing on a marriage that did not exist. I watched the whole cost of the lie land on her at once. She opened her mouth. I saw her decide, right there, to tell the truth, to break it all open, 10 minutes before Nani flew away. And I couldn't let her do that to herself, or to the old woman with the streaming eyes. So I put my hand over Priya's, and Nani's joined hands, and I said, gently, "Nani, that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given her. We'll take care of it, I promise you. We'll take care of all of it." And I meant the last part more than I had any right to. They called the flight. The 40 minutes were up. Nani hugged me. Actually hugged me. This stranger, this discarded man, held my face one more time and said, "You are a good one. I knew it the second I saw you. Take care of my girl." And then the flight attendant wheeled her back toward the gate, Mina following with one last unreadable look at me over her shoulder, and Priya and I stood there in the terminal watching them go. and Priya was shaking. "I have to give it back," she whispered, staring at the bangle on her wrist. "I have to run after her and give it back and tell her the truth. I can't. Nolan, I've stolen 51 years off my grandmother's wrist with a lie. What did I do? What did we just do?" "You didn't steal anything," I said. "You gave an 84-year-old woman 40 of the happiest minutes of her life. She got on that plane lighter than she's been in years. That's not nothing. That's not a crime. It's a lie. It's a kindness wearing a lie's clothes," I said. "I've had a whole week of the truth. The truth is, I'm the man nobody picks, and my fiancé traded me in 8 days ago, and I flew here to tell my parents the wedding's off. That's the truth, and it's been the worst week of my life." I looked at her, and then a stranger grabbed my arm and picked me to be a husband, and for 40 minutes, an old woman looked at me like I was worth something, and it's the best I've felt in longer than I can remember. So don't tell me kindness is a crime. Some lies are just love that hasn't caught up to the facts yet. Priya stared at me. "Your fiancé left you 8 days ago." "For someone more exciting," I said. "I'm an actuary. It was always going to be a short list of reasons." And Priya Anand, panicked, guilt-racked, holding her grandmother's bangle, started to laugh and cry at the same time, and she said, "You are the least boring man I have ever met in my life. You just impersonated a woman's husband to protect her grandmother's heart. Who does that?" "A low-risk man taking the only risk he's got left," I said. We exchanged numbers in the terminal. To sort out the bangle, we told each other. Just the bangle. It was never just the bangle. She called that night, to agonize about Nani. I answered, and we talked for 3 hours. She called the next night about the bangle again, and we talked for 4. Within 2 weeks, the bangle was an excuse, and we both knew it. And within a month, I'd driven to her city. I lived 2 hours away, it turned out, close enough. And we sat in a coffee shop, and finally talked, without a countdown clock ticking over us. And the more I learned about Priya Anand, the more I understood why she'd grabbed a stranger's arm rather than tell her grandmother the truth. Priya had spent her whole life being the family's disappointment for one reason. She wasn't married. Her younger sister had married at 24. Her cousins were all settled. Priya, brilliant, funny, running her own small design studio, was 30 and single, and at every family gathering for a decade, she'd been the object of pity and pressure and endless matchmaking with terrible men her mother approved of. She'd stopped dating anyone real because every relationship became a family referendum. And Nani, her one true ally, the woman who'd raised her while her parents worked, had only one sadness left in her long life, that she might not live to see her Priya happy. Every time I visited, Priya told me, Nani would hold my face and say, "I just want to know you're not alone before I go." And I couldn't fix it. So one day, 2 years ago, I told a small lie. I said I'd met someone, just to see her smile, and the lie grew, because her smile was worth it, until it became a husband, until it became a wedding I said was small and private, until it became today. "You lied to your grandmother for 2 years, I said, so she could die, believing you weren't alone. I know how it sounds. It sounds, I said, like the most love I've ever heard of anyone doing, for anyone. It sounds like you'd rather carry a 2-year lie than let her spend one night worried about you." I looked at her. "Priya, your family thinks you're a disappointment because you're not married. They've got it exactly backward. You're the only one at that table who loves somebody enough to build a whole fiction to protect their heart. That's not a woman nobody wants. That's a woman nobody deserves." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My fiancé, who doesn't exist, is better at this than any real man I've ever dated." "I've had a week to practice being unwanted," I said. "Turns out it makes you pretty clear about what actually matters." We kept meeting. It stopped being about the bangle around the third coffee, and neither of us pretended otherwise after the fifth. One evening about 2 months in, she took me to the bookstore, the actual one, the one we'd invented a wedding meet-cute in, because we'd decided that if we were going to keep telling Nani the story, we ought to at least have stood in the place once. We found the display we'd supposedly knocked over, and standing there in the poetry section, Priya turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something, and you promise not to give me the calm, reasonable actuary answer? I can try, it's my only setting." "Are we doing this because it's real?" she said. "Or because we got tangled in a lie, and we're both too kind to walk away from it? Because I've spent my whole life being everyone's obligation, Nolan. The daughter they have to marry off, the problem to solve. I can't be your obligation too. I'd rather be nothing to you than a thing you feel you have to see through." I thought about the reasonable answer. Then I didn't give it. "8 days before you grabbed my arm," I said. "A woman I'd loved for 3 years told me I was a safe, sensible obligation she didn't want anymore. So I know exactly what you're asking, and exactly how much it costs to ask it." I took her hand. "You are not an obligation, Priya. You're the first thing in my whole careful life I've wanted, that I couldn't have justified on a spreadsheet. I didn't calculate you. That's how I know it's real. You're the one variable I never saw coming, and I don't want to solve you. I just want to keep being surprised." She kissed me then, in the poetry section of a bookstore we'd lied about, and it was the first thing about our marriage that was completely, undeniably true. Here's what I want you to understand, because it's the whole point. Neither of us was on the rebound, and neither of us was reckless. I'd been the safe man my entire life, and Priya had been alone her entire adult life. And we both knew exactly how much it costs to reach for the wrong thing at the wrong time. So we went slow, we went honest. The only 2 people in the world who knew the marriage was fake spent months building a real one, carefully, from the ground up, on top of the strangest foundation any couple ever had.